You're listening to KNSJ Radio. This is Angela D. Joseph with Women of Color Roar Radio Show. This is the show that talks about people, politics, and policy. And I just got back from Paris. I went to the Olympics. It was amazing. And I got a chance to see all those Black women running, playing tennis on the balance bars. And it was all about us and winning gold. I'm sure everybody was happy to see Simone. It was all about her at this Olympics. And I got to see Gabby. I got to see Shikari come across that finish line and finally get that gold. And, seeing all the women from all around the world, there were Black women representing all these countries. And it is our time. It is our time. And today on Women of Color Roar, I'm so happy we're continuing this series where we're learning about our Vice President, Kamala Harris. And since we started the series, she has, of course, stepped in now as the official nominee for the Democratic Party for President of the United States. And so it's a big time, it's an important time. And my guests on the show today have known her since childhood. And what we're trying to do for people is get them to see really who she is, the whole story. So you really do understand who she is, where she comes from, why she turned into the woman that she is today. So I'm really excited to welcome on to the show. So Stacey Johnson Baptiste, welcome to the show, Stacey.
Thank you so much for having me, Angela.
And Stacey is a childhood friend of VP Kamala Harris, and she's the author of Friends from the Beginning. The Berkeley Village That Raised Kamala and Me is her book. And I've just started reading her book and I recommend it. It's on Amazon. And welcoming back to the show, Carole Porter. And Carole, when you came on the show the first time, you were known as the other girl on the bus. And Carole, you can turn your camera on. And, we were talking about back then when when Kamala was first running for president back in 2019, how she talked about being on the bus and how that experience helped to mold her. And you were there with her and you told us about that. So welcome back on the show. And Carole, kind of bring us up to date. What has happened since I've seen you in 4 years? She's actually been the vice president. How's it been having your childhood friend as vice president of the United States?
Well, first of all, I want to correct. It was the other little girl on the bus is my name.
Wait, you're just muted.
Step into her own. And to step into her being, who she is, who I've always known her to be. Kamala is an authentic, value-based, belief-based, driven leader who really believes in
your voice is going out. Your audio is dropping a little bit. So Carole, I'm gonna come back to you, but your voice was dropping just a little bit.
Okay. Come back to me.
Okay. All right. I'll come back to you. All right. So, Stacey, so now, I was reading your book and you also grew up in Berkeley, and Berkeley, it was known as kind of like this hotbed of advocacy and the resistance. And that was where we had all the student unrest. And we learned that Kamala's parents met each other during that period there. So what was your childhood like in that type of atmosphere? And how did you first meet Kamala?
Okay, sure. Thank you. So Kamala and I first met when we were in kindergarten at Birkwood Hedge School. And we hit it off immediately. We became each other's very first best friend. And then our mothers became really, really close. So they became close friends. And just as you said, Berkeley during the 60s and the 70s was always at the forefront of protests and civil rights and women's rights and animal rights and whatever movement was going on, whether it was in the Bay Area or California or across the country or the world even. Berkeley was engaged and participating in some kind of way. So we grew up around this. You know, Carole and I, you know, Kamala, our friends, we would see protests happening all around the UC Berkeley campus or People's Park, or you know, small groups of folks with signs, you know, throughout our small, geographically small city, but it was very, very large in terms of what it represented. So yeah, and then Kamala's parents met when they were at UC Berkeley and became very engaged, very active, along with some folks that Kamala and I refer to as our Uncle Sherman and Aunt Mary, as well as Aubrey LeBrie. So there was this group of students that Kamala's mom, was a part of, and they would even have they would host these gatherings at our Aunt Mary and her brother Freddie's apartment back then, to talk about social issues, civil rights issues. And some of the people that they would invite included Malcolm X, Maya Angelou, Fannie Lou Hamer. So they were really
And you
deeply
got to meet
involved.
them as a child?
Yes, actually, Maya Angelou did come to my parents' house once.
That's
Once.
amazing.
So I wouldn't say, you know, that I was necessarily, you know, involved as a child, but we were around this. So we would, you know, hear and pick up things, but it was more of a culture of like self-pride, you know, kind of Afrocentric, and but also very much aware and appreciative of other cultures, and just a very diverse, vibrant environment.
Carole,
Yeah.
you know, recently we had a little mumblings um, about Kamala and her ethnicity, and I know I did read something that you also said that you also are biracial or
Mhm.
racially mixed also, and she obviously we know her mother was of Indian descent, and that's an important part of her and her upbringing. Now, when people say her father was Jamaican, my family's West Indian, but Jamaican isn't actually a race. I mean, they are Afro Jamaican because, you know, there was a slave ship that stopped in the islands, like my family heritage, where we have African descendants. You know, they're also in where we're from in Trinidad. The same thing happened in Jamaica, and I think that
Mhm.
that's kind of a mixing thing. So tell me a little bit about you and Kamala, and ethnically, how did you all identify as children? How did you all manage that?
So, you know, like Stacy, I grew up in Berkeley, but Kamala and I grew up in West Berkeley. So we grew up in what they call the flatlands. And that area was redlined, meaning that if you lived there, if you chose to live there as an immigrant or a white person, and the immigrants that lived in our neighborhood were of European descent, South American, Asian, it was very, very diverse. You redline meant hazard that Black people live there. So that in and of itself tells you a whole lot. My mom's white, my dad's Black. I was raised to be a Black woman because in America and the, you know, the racial construct that was created here to divide us says that we are Black. If you have one drop, you're Black according to America. But my mom and I know Shamla knew that they had Black, you know, we looked like we were Black women, and that's how we were going to be looked at. That's how we were going to be raised. That does not take away the fact or the pride that we have for, you know, for me, my European side, or Kamala's Indian side. Her grandparents often came to visit. They usually switched off every couple years. And I know when Kamala and I would wait at the bus stop, which is where we met in 1970, was at the bus stop on the corner of Bancroft and Browning, during Berkeley's school desegregation of public schools. She would take me to come visit. She wanted to take me to come see her grandparents. So she would take me to the apartment that they lived in above the daycare at Shelton's, which was very close to my home. And, I'd wave. So we were born Black. That's who we are. That's our cultural and racial, ethnicity. It's how we feel. That's who we are. I've not known Kamala to be anything other than that. We've never spoken about race because we didn't need to speak about it. It just was what it was. And, to just add on to what Stacy was talking about, where we grew up. I mean, we had the first Black mayor of Berkeley was our neighbor, Mayor Warren Widener. Huey Newton regularly visited our neighborhood. He did the breakfast program. The Black Panthers did the breakfast program down at West Campus. And at West Campus, they staged tanks there. There were tanks staged down the street from our house when they were considering implementing martial law in Berkeley because of the protests around the Vietnam War. So, we grew up, the rainbow sign was up the street on Grove Street. And as Stacy said, Maya Angelou, Nina Simone, Baldwin, I mean, just
James
Malcolm
Baldwin.
X, so many different artists and poets and singers and speakers would go there. You'd bring a potluck dinner and eat and commune with other people. A lot of the staff from UC Berkeley went there. We plugged in there because my dad had a friend who was friends with Shamala, Cedric Robinson. So that's how we ended up, I think we went one time as a family with Cedric and his wife, Beth. But it was just an environment that was very diverse, very integrated. We lived among all people, got along with all people and accepted them. It wasn't it wasn't tolerating people. It was living with other people and learning about who they are and what they are. And, Kamala always talks about uplifting. And that's where she comes from. That's what her mother taught her. Cedric Robinson was a really close friend of Shamala's and my dad's. And he was someone that, Shamala helped actually get into UC Berkeley indirectly. So it was just, we all lived together. We all helped each other. We played together. We didn't see all of this.
It was natural. So
it was very natural.
Being in a multicultural neighborhood, it became natural. Do you know what made her decide to go to an HBCU, to make a decision to go to Howard? Why did she, of all the schools, because she was obviously a good student, what made her decide to go to Howard University?
I can start with that one because she and I did talk about college quite a bit. And I don't know if she shared exactly why Howard, but I just remember that was the school that she wanted to go to. There was no other consideration, no other options for her. Howard was it for as long as I can remember. And I know at that time I wanted to go to UC Davis. So we were very clear on where we wanted to go and why. And so I believe it was very important to her to go to a historically Black college. And she wanted to be an attorney, probably because our Uncle Sherman was. But yeah, as far as my memory goes back, she always wanted to go to Howard.
Do you know, I know that her father was is an economist, and she majored in also in economics.
Yeah.
Do you know what type of influence her father had perhaps on any of her decisions?
No, I really don't because I was not around Donald much. And if I was probably like 5 years old. So I really don't remember. My mom has like a vague recollection of being around him, but this would have been, in the late 60s, early 70s. So I don't really remember, but it makes sense because you do need to have a good base knowledge of economics And I think everyone should, especially now since, there's, well, anyway, that's a whole nother story.
Right. Well, I just
Um,
it just reminded me of my father.
yeah,
So my father, also West Indian man, was also very strict, and you had to do your studies, and you had to, everything was very serious. And so so that has a certain effect on you in your life when you have
Well,
that.
I'll just say
It,
I do know that Maya and Kamala would go there sometimes on the weekend. They would go to Palo Alto. I just remember her saying she wasn't, that they were going to their dad's house maybe once or twice. But I, like Stacy, I was never around him. I just knew that they had a relationship with him, but
yeah.
we didn't talk about it.
And if I
I
could just
noticed, yeah,
add one
I
other
noticed, go ahead.
comment, as pertains to father figures and influence, Uncle Sherman, I think, had a significant influence because he was an attorney. Um,
Mm.
we all spent a lot of time with Uncle Sherman. I saw him every day of my life, basically. Every day I saw Sherman. And he taught Kamala how to play chess. Um,
Now
so
he
he
was
was,
this was whose uncle? This was her uncle?
this was our Uncle Sherman.
It was
So,
like the neighborhood uncle.
well, so okay, so Uncle Sherman, his wife Mary, were good friends of my father.
Okay.
They all met when Sherman and Mary and Shamala were at UC Berkeley. So my dad and Uncle Sherman were like brothers. And then Shamala and Mary became like sisters. So that's kind of the connection that brought us, together. Um, but yeah. So there was that influence, definitely from Uncle Sherman.
And just to add to what Stacy said, Cedric Robinson was also a close friend of Shamla from Berkeley. And I know that he had a strong influence on Maya and Kamala. And he was a huge chess player too. So I'm sure she played with him as well. So she
Strategic
had
thinking.
a lot of strong male influence, I think is what we're trying to say.
Absolutely.
So
Critical
tell me this
thinking.
about, I know there's a lot of stories about her kind of standing up to bullies and that sort of thing. So tell me an anecdote about her and when she started to develop as a leader.
I have a good one. And this one is in my book too. So when we were in kindergarten, so the school that we went to for just kindergarten, was a very like hands-on school, and we did a lot of arts and crafts, projects, field trips, things like that. And so this one day we had worked on some clay art pieces, and they were sitting outside on a table to harden, and this one boy in our class had taken mine, threw it on the ground, and it shattered. Kamala was standing next to me. She got so mad that she stepped in between him and me, said some words to the boy to the point where he got so mad, either picked up a rock or a piece of that hardened clay, hit her in the head really hard. There was, blood streaming down in the whole bit, and Chamla had to come take her to the hospital, and she had to have stitches. Anyway, all that to say that from the very beginning, as a small child, Kamala has always had a fighting spirit. She's
Mm.
always stood up to the bully, and she's protective.
And I'll just add on, Mrs. Shelton was a foster mother. And so Cassandra Shelton lived around the corner from us. And I know Kamala took Cassandra under her wing when she was having challenges and really was, really her mentor or her big sister. She did have, Sharon and Judy, but they were much older than we were. So Kamala was able, Cassandra went to school with us. She took the bus with us to school. And Kamala always, looked after her. She looked after Maya. She just, I think, had that leadership spirit about her. I think Stacy and I also had it. We were also older siblings. But I think, she took responsibility very seriously when it was, given to her or asked of her. That was her nature. And she did, like Stacy said, I think that was a very natural thought process for her, is that, if someone needs help or if someone is being bullied or if someone needs something, that she was going to try and find a way to help. That just is something that's always stayed with me just growing up and being around her.
Do you think that that had an influence in her deciding to become a prosecutor? Because I mean, that's kind of one of those areas that a lot of people of color, Black people, shy away from. But stepping into that role of a prosecutor, do you think that was part of it, being able that protective nature?
Certainly. And wanting to also be on the inside in order to impact change.
Mm.
The only way you can really fix problems and close gaps is to understand it from the inside out, whatever that system or that process is. But yeah, so from the very beginning of her career, she focused on, protecting women and children from abusive situations. So there was that protective nature, that standing up to the bully, again, whether that bully is an individual or a gang or a corporation. That is who she is and who she has always been.
And that's not to say it was easy for her, because I think a lot of people, in her family group probably, and as well friend group, were questioning, why aren't you going to be a defender? And I remember, hearing things from different people and talking to my father about it. And it actually came up through Cedric Robinson and him talking about it. And he said to me that, it was really courageous of her to be a prosecutor. And I didn't really know the difference. I was in college myself, but I didn't really, pay attention to that stuff. And he said, when you're a prosecutor, you have the opportunity to be inside and change systems and change structures. And that was something that resonated with me. So, I wasn't thinking like, oh, wow, Kamala's going to do all this great stuff. But as I got older and I understood it and people said stuff about it, negative stuff about it, I remembered what my dad told me. And it clearly makes a lot of sense to me in seeing the path that she's taken to where she is today.
It's interesting. I've heard her talk about going up the rough side of the mountain, and so making that choice. And some of the policies that she put in place, some of the programs that she started, so that people did not have to be incarcerated but can go back to school, and some of the things, and also even with making sure that children did show up for school, and the type of things that she always seemed to be seeking out the root cause. And so, and I'm wondering if her mother had some influence on that. Her mother also being a scientist and someone wanting to find a cure for cancer. I'm just wondering what type of influence do you think her mother had on her?
Hmm. I can start it off. So Shamla was a huge influence, even going back to what you were um, mentioning earlier as far as academics. It was, Shamla was very, very, serious when it came to schoolwork, homework, and just doing your absolute best. You know, whenever I was around Shamla, she just made me feel as if I needed to put my best foot forward, no matter what it was, whether it was academically or just being a young woman, whatever it is. Um, and possibly because being a scientist, you want to analyze things, you want to get underneath things, you want to get to the root cause of things. So that could have perhaps played into it, but I just think that it was more along the lines of Kamala wanting to impact change and to help those that, in some cases cannot help themselves.
Yeah, I would just add on to what Stacy said, is that when I think of Shamala, just growing up in the neighborhood that we grew up in, and growing up in Berkeley, and growing up with my father, who was part of the second Great Migration from the South, from Hattiesburg, Mississippi, very dark-skinned man. I remember Shamala was dark-skinned, short, had an accent. And I just remember the challenges that my dad had growing up. I mean, raising his family in Berkeley, especially being married to a white woman. And I know with Shamala, I just know, and I've heard things and read things. I know she's had some challenges too. Um, and when you look at who she is, and the fact that she at 19 came from India by herself to UC Berkeley and forged her way, um, is so courageous on so many different levels. And I know that Kamala always says that her mother's two most important things in life were to raise her two daughters and find a cure for breast cancer. And so if you look at that kind of courage, if you look at that kind of strength, tenacity, you know, just going for your goals and making great things happen, then I mean that's that's who Kamala lived with. That's who raised her. So if you look at all of that, it's not surprising to see the path that she's taken and how she's, you know, led her life and to where she is today.
And just to add to that, Shamala was a single mom
Right.
raising two girls. So it would have been natural for Kamala to want to look out for women and children, you know.
So now when she became vice president of the United States, I know that for you having known her since childhood was very exciting and getting to go to the inauguration. So Carol, tell me, what was it like for you to see your childhood friend as vice president of the United States?
It was wonderful. I didn't go to the inauguration. It was a very, you know, because of the pandemic, it was very, very trimmed down. So I stayed home and I did a lot of press. So I was sitting in front of the TV and I had my phone and my iPad, and I think I did probably 6 or 7 interviews that day. And it was so amazing. It was so stunning. And in the back of my mind, I always, you know, it was not surprising to me that she's here and that she is having the opportunity to uplift all of these people and share all of the values and beliefs that she was raised with from her mother, from, you know, family, extended family, the neighborhood we grew up in. You know, us moving to, you know, all of us lived in Oakland growing up, you know, as young adults, I should say, and everything that was going on there. And for her to bring all of that, you know, with her, to me was just, it was, you know, it. Of course, I cried, but it was just, you know, just stunning to see that this person who was, you know, technically for all good reason was on the outside. She's an outsider, and she did some really good work, and she believed in herself, she believed in her values, her beliefs, her country, and she's moved to where she's in a place now, was then as vice president, now as president. I'll just say that she will be president, she doesn't lose. It was stunning to me. It was just, I still have to sit back and really feel this. It's just, you know, it's happening so fast, and I want to really feel and experience this journey because it's just so amazing on so many different levels.
So I was able to attend the inauguration. I was extremely blessed and fortunate. And it was because of that experience, that's what moved me on the flight back to write my book. And as Carol said, this has been just an incredible journey. And, you know, kind of reflecting back on Kamala's life journey and her career path, it, it it's not a surprise. It's surreal in one sense, but also is not a surprise that she is where she is. And I chose the chapter names um, because those are the values and the characteristics that I have always seen in Kamala, and those are the values that we grew up around. So having passion, purpose, vibrance, um, determination, you know, all of that, wisdom. And she is one that brings us along with her, you know. She does not forget where she comes from. And it's just it just warms my heart that she brings us along for this amazing journey.
No, it's interesting what you said, because the fact that she still has relationships that are lifelong relationships says so much about her. Because, you know, one thing, you know, I grew up in Hollywood, and it's like, you know, people become stars, and then, you know, they may or
Fade
may
away.
not speak to you ever again. But the fact that you all still are close and that she's maintained these powerful relationships. And I'll just tell you, when I met her was 14 years ago when she was first running for Attorney General. And it was in the hood, in the Black neighborhood. And somebody was having a fundraiser for her and she got lost. And so I was getting ready to leave. And as I was leaving, she was coming up the stairs. And I spoke to her and she was just warm and charming and lovely. And I just was like, oh. And I went back inside and I listened to her speak. And I can tell you, this was 14 years ago.
Mm.
At that moment, I said, she's going to be president of the United States one day. And I tell people that, and I've said it for 14 years.
Yes.
I knew in that moment there was something, there was a quality that was there. And so, as I've watched her, she obviously won, and then she won again, and then she ran to the Senate, and she became our senator, and she's our vice president. But throughout this time, she has been in preparation for the next step.
Absolutely.
There's been no leaping over. There's been a succession of things. And so I'm very excited to talk to you all, because you knew her from back then, and you're saying you knew from that point, from the time you met her, she had leadership qualities and she had a certain sense of correctness and what was right and wanting to help people. And so as we now know that she is historically the nominee of the Democratic Party for president, which, next week is the convention, but as of now, the votes are in, the delegates have the votes, and she is the party nominee. And out the gate, it's been pretty exciting and exhilarating as we see the young people coming out and the men coming out, and all these groups, having all these Zoom calls and supportive of her. What do you think is going to carry her into this next phase that you know about her?
Mm. Well, so there's a lot of thoughts going through my mind. I went to my very first rally, which was what is today? Yeah, Saturday in Vegas, and the entire stadium at UNLV was packed, and the vibe, the energy, the diversity there was unbelievable. I mean, it's more than a movement. To me, it feels like the universe is moving through her in such a positive, beautiful way, that what's going to carry her is the fact that she brings people together, that she understands and appreciates all people, diversity. And she has the kind of energy and messaging that resonates, and she's authentic, and it's that feeling that people are, it's joyous. And that's what I think is going to carry her, not to mention the fact that she is extremely experienced, more than qualified. So there's all of that, but it's also this sense of joy, that I think people are feeling.
I just want to say that Kamala will be the most qualified president the United States has ever had when she becomes president. Like Stacey, I participated in an activity this weekend with other childhood friends of Stacey, Kamala, and myself, and then also a good friend of ours who worked with Kamala at the Alameda County DA's office. And we were in San Francisco at the Fairmont, and it was just on fire. It was on fire. So, went in and just seeing all of these people who have supported Kamala along her journey, friends, politicians, etc. And we're standing in line, getting ready to go see her. Her staff is, when Stacey talks about joy, her staff is joy. And they were so excited. They said, Kamala got up and said her family's coming today. And then I see to my left, I see Nick, Mina's husband, walk in with the girls. And that almost made me just cry because I already knew what was going to go on when that happened. And then, Cynthia and Leah and I came in behind that, and just Kamala's face just lit up. And we're standing there. She's asking who's coming to the DNC, and we're talking and taking selfies. And she's like, okay, you guys got to go. You guys got to go now. But it was it was a slice of, it just flashed me back to, being at a party or being in the neighborhood or seeing each other somewhere. She is so authentically herself, and her authenticity shines through, and it's clearly shone through her career path, because she has the cream of the crop supporting her, everybody. And everybody who was in that room with us was not just, politicians and high level, people. I mean, they were her homies from the hood, her homies from, Berkeley. We were in there and talking to people, and people are interested in knowing about her and are so thankful for her and who she is and what she brings. So it's quite a journey and a ride that I believe we're going on 4 weeks now of joy and fun and laughter and rally. And she could not have picked. I knew she was going to pick Waltz. That was in my head. And I see exactly why she picked him. I knew a little bit about him, but he just really is on fire with her, and he's got her back, and he's got the American people's back, and they're just going to ride this all the way to the White House.
Yeah, he's, the first thing I saw him, I thought, oh, he's funny.
Yes. Yes.
And that, that was my first thought. It's like, oh my goodness. And I like the fact that he says things, just however he wants to say them.
Down to earth.
Sugar-coated or anything. And I said, oh my goodness, this is what people want. You talk about authenticity. So that's I find him to be enjoyable. The fact that they're the same age, though, I didn't see that one coming.
I didn't know that at first. I was shocked. Yeah. I was like, really?
I know.
You know what?
I was
That's
like,
great.
Oh, wow.
I love
That's
it.
Great.
Yeah. So
like running with your high school mate.
Yeah. So that's pretty exciting. So, when we think about how she would govern, and what her cabinet is going to look like, and I'm very interested. Somebody was saying how when I think it was in your book, right, that it was all female on the pilots, right, on the plane.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And I thought, oh, that's really interesting that that she sent the plane to pick up you all to go to the inauguration, and there was all female pilots. So I mean, that type of a conscious decision, so I'm thinking, I wonder what her cabinet is going to look like, So but there's so many brilliant women that never get an opportunity, and so I'm feeling that as she says, she may be the first but she won't be the last. So I feel like there's going to be a big door opening now for
well, if you talk about influence from Shamala, the women thing, that's huge, and that's who Shamala was. And Shamala was very pro women and supportive of women. So that definitely, I know, was ingrained in Kamala growing up, and see it reflected today.
And just by the simple fact that she's a role model. I mean, representing. So other, girls of any color are now thinking, okay, I can do anything I put my mind to. And that is how Shamala was. Whatever, there wasn't anything you could not do with hard work and putting your mind to it. So from that standpoint, I mean, and we're 50%, I mean, of the population, but
51,
we're represented at a very, and I forget the stats, but such as a very, very small percentage of, positions, leadership roles. So yeah, this will definitely help to change some of that.
I think Hillary she put all the cracks in the glass ceiling, and Kamala is going to crash right through it.
You know, it's interesting that the thing about her that I think sometimes is interesting is when she starts talking about cooking. That, you know,
Mm.
you kind of don't expect that, and all of a sudden, you know, someone will ask her a question and she'll just stop everything and she'll start explaining exactly how, you know, to brine the turkey or whatever she's explaining. Did you all ever are we ever around her when she was cooking?
Oh, yes. Well, so Kamala and I, back in the early 90s, we bought condominiums in the same building. So she was on the mezzanine level and I was on the ninth. So after work, when we were both home, I would pour a glass of wine, go down the elevator, hang out with her, watch her cook. There's a couple of memories. One, she and I hosted a Mother's Day brunch, and one of the dishes, I will never forget it. I cannot figure out how to recreate it, but it was a polenta dish. She baked it. She had a thick layer of these sauteed mushrooms. And I ate so much of that. Like I kept going back. So there's that. Her mom Shamala was an amazing cook. We would go out to their house in Oakland when, like, you know, for the holidays, or when Shamala's sisters and her brother would visit from India. Shamla would have a spread like you've never seen, all kinds of food, American food, Indian food, everything. And she made these delicious bourbon balls, and we weren't 21. We were nowhere near 21. But Kamala and I would sneak into the kitchen to take some of those bourbon balls because they were so good. So yeah, yeah, she's a wonderful cook, like her
And
mother.
that, you know, from where we came from, where we grew up in Berkeley, my mother cooked everything. My mother grew, you know, we came from the generation of Alice Waters,
Yes.
who, you know, grew our own vegetables and made everything from scratch. That's where we all came from. So that is a tradition that she's kept up, and I think it's just really intimate for her and her family because that's how we grew up.
Mhm.
So tell me about the coming up, the inauguration. I'm already in January now.
Ah,
Oh my goodness. So what is that going to be like? First of all, the first female president of the United States, a woman of color, woman of an immigrant, woman from immigrant parents, and having her in that role. And
and she's a Black woman in America.
she's a Black woman in America. So which means everything you have to do doubly, and that's why, you know, woman of color roar. That's why we roar,
Yeah.
because you know, we have to. But, you know, I'm happy to say that since from the time I started Women of Color Roar, I can see I knew we were getting here, and here we are. And
Yeah.
so I'm very excited about the fact that the young women of today are going to get to see this and they get to live it. And this is something that is going nobody's going to be able to take this away from them, the representation that they have, you know, before them.
They're not
And
going to be able to take that away from any of us, Angela.
Mhm.
Any of us.
mhm,
This is all of us Black women rising up.
Mhm.
yes, yes. So how do you feel about the president of the United States? You're going to go drop by and hang out in the Oval Office?
That would be amazing. So, but just to add to your question, you know, what this will mean on Inauguration Day, when she's being sworn in as our first female president. Um, Not only is it a fulfillment of the promise of America, right? Um, but it's also about time. It's about time. I mean, women have been leading countries and leading armies for thousands of years, but just not in this country. So it's about time. But it's going to be just such a joyous day of pride and celebration, and and Kamala has said this herself many times, that she stands on the shoulders of those who have fought for this, who have died for, you know, for this. So it is huge. It is so significant. And it should be for all people, no matter what color you are.
For me, I just, I think back to my parents trying to buy a house in the 1960s. So my parents bought their house in 68. And there's a little town, Albany, right next to Berkeley that my parents tried to buy in, and they were shut out. And to think that, or to see the president of the United States come from, this West Berkeley, red-lined, flat-land neighborhood with immigrants who were not readily accepted because of accents, European, Asian, South American, Caribbean, Black people who came from the South who spoke differently. And to come from a middle to lower income neighborhood. We had projects that were around the corner from where Kamala and I lived. And to persevere, her mom to come as 19th from Chennai, to come to, where we were raised with, all of the love of Mrs. Regina Shelton. I can't speak more highly of her. She was a giant, a matriarch in our neighborhood. Yeah. And to see that, and for Kamala to be representing all of that all the way up. And so all these little girls, all these little boys who come from places that have been disenfranchised, have been seen as places nobody wanted to live, that they wanted to bus us up to, the Berkeley Hills, which, I enjoyed it when it happened, to give us another experience that we might not have readily been able to know. For her to be able to persevere through all of that, plus everything else she's had to persevere through, just gives everyone, every child, an opportunity and a pathway that says, yes, you can do this in America. Now, do you have to work hard? Yeah, you got to work hard. And sometimes you might have to work a little bit harder, but you can do anything you decide you want to do. And I think she's just representing that in everything, in the way that she lives and in the work that she does and in the gifts that I think she gives all of us. I mean, she's lifted me up. I mean, and like Stacey said, I mean, she's pulled all of us along with her. When she says when she's lifted up, she's lifting up. That's what she does. And I will continue to support her. I will continue to make any way I can to go see her when she invites me to something, to be there when she calls, because I know that it's going to be to do good work or to make good trouble and get some good stuff done. So I'm there. I'm 200% from the day she ran for president. I'm there.
I'm there with that little girl that I met in kindergarten, all the way till the end.
Well, to have her two childhood friends on the show is really quite magnificent. And, this is Woman of Color Roar, and we're here to celebrate Black women and leadership. And I couldn't have a better, brighter moment than this moment. To have a show and be able to celebrate the first Black and Asian woman who is now the nominee of the Democratic Party, the first in history. I actually have my Shirley Chisholm cup, the first Black woman to run for president. And this is a historic moment that we're living in. And I really want to say thank you to both of you. This is such an important show. And yes, I'm going to post it and share it, and you will be welcome to also do that. And I know you all have been extremely in demand and busy. So Carole, thank you for, blessing us and to also to get Stacey to come on the show and for me to get to meet you and learn about your book. I'm going to get to listen to the rest of it. And but tell people a little bit. I know it's on Amazon. Where else can they get your book? Is it available in other places?
Barnes and Nobles, Target.
Okay.
Yeah, but Amazon is probably easy.
Well, I think when you come in January, if you'd love to sign some books, I know that we would
Mm.
love to get a signed copy of your book.
Absolutely. I would be
Oh, that would be
honored.
yeah, that would be great. So well, let people know that you're gonna be here at Women of Color Roar. It's
Yeah.
February 1st, 2025,
Okay.
first Saturday in Black History Month,
I
and
will be
you
there.
can be our special guest and sign books.
Oh my God, I would be honored. Thank
Oh,
you, Angela. Thank
yes,
you.
yes, and Carol, you're invited, and, we're
Yeah.
gonna have a lot to we'll have so much to celebrate because
Yeah.
we'll be coming back from DC from the inauguration.
Right. Can you send me an
That'd be
invitation or something?
I
amazing.
Send me something I can put on my calendar so I can plan
Yes,
for it.
I absolutely will. So,
I'll be there. I'll help Stacy with her books.
I'm
oh,
so
great.
excited. I
Yes,
mean,
that'll
I'm
be so fun,
excited.
and I tell you, my Shirley Ralph is a friend of mine. She was on the show when you did the
Yes.
show last time, and
Wonderful
Cheryl,
woman.
yeah, and she now, she just got nominated for her third Emmy
I
Award, her
know.
third, and she's getting a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame.
That's
She is her own
Oh.
fabulous.
star, and I've known her, since she was we were teenagers,
Oh,
and so
wow.
I'll be in your place when talking about her when. I'll be
Yeah.
Yeah.
like, I knew her when, but anyway, she came in to do Woman of Color Roar, and it was so wonderful to have her here, and she brought and she every book she has a book too. They all sold out. Every book.
Okay.
She had
Oh,
so many books
wow.
because everyone bought up all the books that day that she came to the breakfast. So I look forward to seeing you all in February, but seeing you all in January, and of course, I'll be seeing you in the media. And I appreciate you coming on the show today. This is Woman of Color Roar radio show where we talk about people, policy, and politics. And we're celebrating the first woman of color who is nominated by a major party for President of the United States. The convention is next week. And onward to inauguration day on January 20th. So thank you so much for joining me, Stacey. Thank you, Carol, and I look forward to seeing both of you again. You all have a lovely day.
You as
Thank
well.
you.
Thank you.
Okay,
Okay.
thank you.
Bye.
Bye. This is Angela D. Joseph. Thank you for listening. You've been listening to the Woman of Color Roar radio show with Angela D. Joseph, the show that talks about people, policy, and politics. I hope you enjoyed the show, and we look forward to seeing you next time.